Hi, welcome to ThreatTraq Essentials. As you can tell, we're all remote today. I'm here with John Markley, who is on the show today. Thanks for joining us, John.
Thanks for having me, Don.
We're going to talk about some everyday cybersecurity lessons that we can learn from this week's ThreatTraq stories. So, John, let's first talk about the one that John Hogaboom brought to us, which was about a wormable vulnerability in SMB V3. Is that how we say it?
You can, or if you've been around a while, you could call it NetBIOS. You know, that's the old timers may remember it there. But the server message block, SMB, is the.
So what is it exactly? Tell us what it does.
In a Microsoft Windows environment, it's the protocol that's used between computers that lets them connect, if you want to think about it that way. So share files, mount a drive. It's basically how Windows computers can talk to one another.
Okay, so it's something on a very basic level. And this vulnerability, tell me about it. What is it and what are the dangers that it poses?
So if people who are running Windows 10, which should be most everyone, and Windows Server, some of the newer versions of Windows servers, the vulnerability is if you have this port, when you think about normal TCP/IP, SMB runs over a number of ports, but 445 is TCP is the most common. If you have that port open to the internet, which is not a good thing, but if you do have it open to the internet, this particular vulnerability can be exploited so that a bad guy could actually put code on your system, either your client or your server. So it's almost a basic fundamental vulnerability that Microsoft had to patch to keep the machine safe.
So people out there who are watching, what do they need to do to protect themselves? I think it's an obvious answer, but we say it every week. Tell me what it is.
Well, there's a couple reasons. The obvious one, I'll do that second. The first one is be very cautious about keeping, like I said earlier, keeping these SMB ports open at all to the internet. And some of the ones you may see are like the 137s, 138, 139, but 445 is the most common with the new machines. But obviously, the thing to do now is just patch. Keep your machines patched. Keep your machines monitored, and I don't think you're going to find yourself susceptible to this issue.
Well, as I said before, we're all working remotely now because of the coronavirus outbreak. And Michael Klepper brought us a story that security professionals need to do or keep in mind during this. Can you just walk us through at a very high level what some of those things are and even how they relate to the average user who may be working remotely during this crisis?
Yeah, some of these, I think, you'll think of them as almost common sense, but then in another way, you think I'm in my office day to day, but now I'm home. So it's things like, what kind of equipment do they have? Are they, keeping their stuff secure? Are they bringing home material? Things like, you would print something at home, at the office, not feel too guilty about having it floating around, but do you really need it sitting on your desk when your roommate or your kids, walk in the door? There's things like that, or things like, you have a different work-home balance. If you're used to being at the office or you're used to your kids being at school, and now all of a sudden they're home, you may need to shift your office hours. So the professionals who are monitoring the environment may just need to keep an eye out for changing patterns and not necessarily get concerned about them, because in this special circumstance, we're going to have people working different routines, different patterns. But they just got to be aware. The bad guys, I always hate to use that term, but the bad guys know that you're home. They know that you're stressed, and they know that this is an opportunity to, perhaps target people that may not necessarily always have been targeted for phishing or other threats.
So it's really a time for extra vigilance for everybody about
Correct.
Security, not just what we've talked about in weeks past about some coronavirus scams that are going around, and we hear more about them every day, but just in general that you have to think differently when working remotely and take these security considerations into mind.
Yeah, you got to make sure what you realize that now all of a sudden I'm not only protecting myself, but I'm protecting my company from my home. And if you're not familiar or comfortable doing that, or your company's not familiar or comfortable doing that, there has to be some way to level set that comfort level. And that may just be a simple matter of doing a survey or educational awareness to the individuals who may not, have been working from home on a regular basis, and just keep that level of contact open and education and awareness to prevent any kind of concern you might have once all this is over.
And if you are someone who is working at home, it's a good idea, if you have questions, you're unsure about things, to contact the IT and security professionals at your company, and also follow your company's policies. Use the tools they give you and follow those policies. And if you have questions about them, ask.
Absolutely.
So let's talk about the story you brought to us about a cookie thief. And it's not about people going out and hoarding the Girl Scout cookies at the supermarket right now. This is something different.
Yeah, it definitely is. And don't look in my freezer right now, because there's quite a few. You mentioned the Girl Scout cookies. That's kind of a scary thought in itself. But this is a piece of malware that runs on an Android phone. And this malware, obtained through however you may have gotten it, to click the link, somebody sent it to you, said, hey, here's a free thing. It's intended to pretend to be you. So it's going to do that by pulling off what we call cookies, which store like your password, your information, and do some other tricks behind the scenes to fool our social media services into thinking not only are these posts coming from the victim, but that that there's no other triggers that might make suspicious that they're not real. So it's a little bit of a challenge. The cookies in some ways are a key to a machine, and a phone is a machine.
So how do people protect themselves in this scenario?
Well, there's a couple ways. I think that we harp on this, and we've harped on it even here. Is you keep your devices up to date. Keep them, make sure they're patched, make sure that they're not running anything outdated. Don't. Kind of the second thing I would always say is that if something asks for permissions and you feel uncomfortable giving it those permissions, I always point to a game asking for use of your camera or your microphone, and you think, well, why would you need that? So it's those types of extra permissions you need to be careful about. But, of course, the biggest and the most easy solution, I think, of anything is don't install software unless it comes from an authorized source, like the Google Play Store. Anything else, whether you get it from a text saying, hey, here's a copy of a free game, or hey, here's how to get this without having to pay for it. That's suspicious. Don't click those links. Don't open those things. And 99% of the time, you're not even going to have a concern at all that you're going to have a problem like this.
Well, John, thank you for being on the show, and thank you all for watching. Remember to like and subscribe, and if you want to take a deeper dive into these stories, click on the playlist below, and you can read more about them. We'll see you next time, and remember to stay safe.